Hey everybody, it's Lon.TV, and we're taking a look today at the Samsung CFG70 monitor. This is a gaming monitor that runs at 144 hertz at its maximum refresh rate, and it's curved, as you can see, as well, with a really crazy arm mechanism on here. So we're going to check this thing out, see how it works. It does support AMD Freesync, so I have it hooked up to my MacBook Pro running in Windows, which supports that. So we'll be looking at all the different ways that you can use this monitor here in just a second. But I do want to mention, in the interest of full disclosure, this came in free of charge through the Amazon Vine program. However, all the opinions you're about to hear are my own. Nobody is paying for this review, and no one is reviewing this content before it is posted. All right, so let's take a closer look at the hardware now. This is a 24-inch display, and it's 1080p. And I found with these 24-inch displays, 1080p doesn't always look so great compared to like a 1440p monitor that is just a little higher in its resolution. So it doesn't look bad, but you might see some jagged edges on text and whatnot. But gaming is pretty good on it. And the panel itself is really nice. It does have a nice curvature to it, which actually does help its image quality a little bit. This is using Samsung's VA panel, which means that you will get good viewing angles from the sides on it, but you definitely need to get the up and down adjusted to an appropriate spot, because they tend to not look as good when you're looking down on them or looking up at them. So you do have a lot of range on the included arm here to get it into a good position. So I found this same technology to look pretty nice on my Samsung television. This one follows in a similar course, but again, you definitely want to get everything adjusted to get the best possible image. But it does have a very nice contrast ratio of 3,000 to 1. They rate the sRGB at 125%. This is running with the Samsung Quantum Dot technology, and the color is really nice on this, actually, especially when you're playing some colorful games or have a nice contrast here, like this photo I took from Hawaii. I wish I could go back there again. Really decent blacks on it, and really nice color saturation as well. And there are, of course, settings to get everything calibrated the way you like. So I'm really pleased with the image quality, and not any backlight bleed that I can see, because this technology really doesn't lend itself to that. Now, I did want to point out one image quality issue that you should be aware of. A commenter in my Amazon written review pointed me towards a YouTube video that showed some purple ghosting under certain conditions in certain games with certain graphical elements, and I'll put a link to that video down below. I was able to replicate that problem on this display as well. I found it wasn't as bad on mine as it is in the YouTube video that I'm going to point you to, but it's still somewhat visible. So I think they did make either a firmware or hardware change in around December of 2016, which largely eliminated the problem, but it's still marginally there. I'm not noticing it all that often, though, as I'm playing, if at all, but there might be circumstances where you might see a little bit of purple ghosting going on, depending on the game you're playing and some of the graphical elements on screen. And the monitor response rate is 1 millisecond. When you combine that with the 144 hertz maximum frame rate, you've got really smooth motion on here. I've actually had this monitor for about 2 months now, and I've been playing a bunch of games on it on my gaming PC over there, and everything looks really nice on it. And my gaming PC is running with an Nvidia card. If you have an AMD card, it supports FreeSync, so the monitor and the card will synchronize their frame rates up, and it'll look really smooth on the AMD hardware, perhaps a little more smooth than it might on the Nvidia stuff, because it does not support the Nvidia GSync technology. Speaking of motion, it does have a lot of motion to its stand here, as you can see. The stand is a bit bizarre. It's kind of a different design than I'm used to, and it does give you a tremendous range of motion, especially on the vertical here. So you can see you can go down about this low and then this high. You've got a lot of motion from left to right as well, so you can easily move the display around if you have friends visiting or something like that. You can even go into this orientation as well if you wish, although it's a little weird with the curve going this way, but you do have that as an option. The only problem, though, with an arm this long is that the monitor tends to bounce around quite a bit when you're using cheap furniture in particular, like I do. Everything in this place is IKEA, so as the desk bounces, your movement will get translated over to the monitor as well. So that's been the one issue that I've been seeing with this stand. This is Visa compatible, though, so you could get yourself a Visa stand and get around that issue if you like, but there is a great range of motion here on the stand. As for inputs, you've got a few on the back here. You've got DisplayPort, which is what I would recommend using. It also has HDMI. It does support FreeSync over the HDMI ports, but the frame rate range is a little different. I'll get into that when we cover FreeSync a little later in the video. There's an audio output here for headphones, so if you are playing a game and you're not hearing anything out of your speakers, it's likely routing into the monitor. There are no speakers in the monitor, so you will need to reroute your audio or plug some speakers into the back of the monitor here. This is called Service. There must be some accessory that you can plug in for accessing some other features of the monitor here. I don't have anything that does that, so we won't be looking at the service port in this video. It does have a light, by the way, that will transmit down onto the base. It's just blue, and it can actually go in sync with your music or your sounds from your game if you are routing audio through the monitor. Not a great feature, but it's there if you want to have a light going, or you can just have it pulsate underneath the monitor. Not my favorite feature, but it's there if you want it. It actually has a very nice on-screen display that you activate with this little joystick controller here in the back. So let me flip over the monitor here so you can see what that looks like when it comes up. So you do get a pretty nice display here. What I really like about it is that it gives you all of the current connection information on your display. So right now I've got 144 hertz coming out of my computer. Freesync is on. It's got the low input lag option here enabled as well. So everything is kind of front and center, so you know exactly what your computer is transmitting over to it. Let's take a closer look now and see what some of our options are for configuring the display. I'm just going to step through a couple of the key features here of the on-screen display. You're going to notice that a few of these things are grayed out right now because I'm at 144 hertz, and I don't think the monitor can do any image processing when you're running at that frame rate. But if you are at lower frame rates, there are some options maybe to smooth things out by adjusting some of these things. And I would suggest not doing that, because even though the image might look a little bit nicer, you will get input lag. But the nice thing is that you get an indicator as to whether or not your settings are introducing input lag here. So when this says on, you're in good shape. There are some picture modes here based on what Samsung thinks certain games should look like. So you can see FPS here is a little brighter than the real-time strategy option is. So you can go through some of these presets or set everything up yourself if you want. So I've got mine to custom right now. This black equalizer determines how bright the dark areas of the screen are. So if you set the value to 20, it's a little bit brighter. There's also a separate brightness control in the picture mode as well, so you can really tweak things to where you want to go with them. To turn Freesync on, you do have to go into the setting here and enable it. And there are two different modes. Standard engine will run with the display port between 90 hertz and 144 hertz. And then when you have it on the ultimate engine, Freesync will kick in around 70 hertz. So 70 to 144 range on display port, 90 to 144 in the standard mode. On HDMI, the range is 62 to 119 hertz. So I think you really should go with DisplayPort. Just gives you the best range possible on this, and that's where I've left mine. And I left the ultimate engine on to get down to the 70 hertz for the beginning portion of that range. And we'll see that in action when we load up Rocket League in a few minutes here. And then you can go down here to save settings and actually have different profiles for different games. So you can have your RTS, for example, be darker or brighter than your FPS, and then just quickly adjust the setting here to the one that you wish to go with there. So pretty convenient on that front. Picture here is your usual picture settings. You can adjust the color, contrast, and brightness and all that kind of stuff. There's also the ability here to turn on or off the arena lighting. I'm just going to zoom out real quick so you can see what that arena lighting looks like. So I can set it over here to blink, and what it basically does here is just pulsate with just a little random, not a random, but a regular interval here, or I can have it match to the music. It looks a little bit cooler in the dark, but really not a feature I'm that crazy about. I usually leave it off, but you have the option to adjust that setting right there if you wish. So not too much on here, but a really nice information panel that gives you the information you need very quickly. And then, of course, you can see what resolution you're at here just by going down to the information panel. All right, so let's check out a game now. I've got Rocket League running on my Mac, which is running Windows. Long story, but this is the only accessible AMD GPU I had at the moment. And I'm getting frame rates between about 110 and about 150 frames per second, depending on what's going on screen. And what's nice about this is that the frame rate is varying quite a bit, and I'm not seeing any interruption in smoothness here of the motion, if that makes sense. So it really is running very consistently, provided the game stays within that frame rate there. And that's one of the challenges with these synchronization technologies. You do have to have a computer that can, first of all, hit the range. And in this case, the range is 70 to 144 frames per second. And getting it to stay within that range can be a little challenging because sometimes it goes above it. You might see some screen tearing when it does. But the nice thing is that when you're in an active scene like this, I was just at about 120 frames per second right there. Everything was very consistently smooth on it. And it looked just as smooth there as it does when I'm seeing frame rates of around 100 144 frames per second. So really does work quite nicely, but you will see screen tearing if you go above 144 in your game, and you also see some things if you go below 70 as well. So you really need to tweak things, and again, make sure that your computer is fast enough to get yourself up to the frame rates that this display can support, because if you're really only trying to get 60 frames per second out of your game, you definitely don't need a 144 hertz monitor. But the good news is that if you are getting that high, it really looks kind of nice actually, especially due to the color here, as well as the very fast motion that you'll see on screen with very minimal motion blur, if any. The other thing that I like about this is that the input lag on the controller is also very minimal. So what I do typically for testing controller lag is I hook up an Xbox controller with a USB cable, and this eliminates any wireless lag. And then I take out a game testing utility that I have, and then I take my smartphone out, which records at 244 frames per second, and I push the button and see how long it takes for that input to get registered on screen. And I got 44 milliseconds in lag between the time that I pushed the button and something happened on screen, which is very fast. In fact, the fastest that I have tested here after doing all the different testing that I've been doing. I actually did a video on game controller input lag, and it's very complicated because it's not just the monitor, it's not just the computer, it's also the controllers too. So this one I found to be the fastest when connected via USB, and 44 milliseconds is pretty darn good. I think if you are on an old school retro game console and hooked up to a CRT, you're looking at about 30 milliseconds or so. So 44 is really good here, and I think for gaming, this monitor is going to do quite well. So overall, I am very impressed with this. $289, so it does cost a little more than other 24-inch 1080p monitors do out there, but you're going to get a very nice quality image here. You're going to get frame rates that can go to 144 hertz natively on the display, 1 millisecond response rate, really well tuned for gaming, just not as sharp as I would like because it is only 1080p at this size. 1440p would have looked a little bit nicer. So make sure your graphics card is up to par, and I think you'll be quite pleased with this, especially if you are using an AMD GPU, but I've been very happy with it with my Nvidia hardware as well. This is Lon.TV, thanks for watching.
This channel is brought to you by my Patreon supporters, including gold level supporters Mark Bollinger, Brian Miller, Mr. Morse, and Cody Falk. If you want to help the channel, you can by contributing as little as $1 a month. Head over to Lon.TV/Patreon to learn more. And don't forget to subscribe. Visit Lon.TV/S.